I wiped the sweat from my forehead and glanced at my wristwatch. It was only 15 minutes until the end of the day. The air conditioning in the office had broken down once again, and the heat was unbearable. Everything in this old Horizon construction building was always broken, from the toilets to the doorknobs. 35 years I'd worked here as an accountant, and sometimes it felt like the walls had absorbed more of my size than paint. The monitor screen flickered with open spreadsheets. I had just finished reconciling the quarterly statements and was about to send the documents to Leon in finance when I saw Melinda Abbott, the head of human resources, enter the room. Strange. She usually went home before anyone else. Melinda headed straight for my desk, and something about her strained smile made my stomach clench. Eleanor, could you come into the conference room? Mr. Kowalski would like to speak with you. An alarm bell rang in my head. Robert Kowalski, the CEO, never called rank-and-file employees in for a conversation without a good reason. I shut down my computer and adjusted the collar of my blouse. In the conference room besides Kowalski sat Thomas Blake, the CFO. They both smiled strainedly when I walked in. Have a seat, Mrs. Kimball. Kowalski pointed to the chair across from me. I couldn't remember the last time he'd called me by my last name. Eleanor, you're a great employee, he began, and my heart dropped. This kind of talk never ended well. 35 years of perfect service speaks for itself. But, I asked, breaking the inevitable pause. Kowalski glanced over at Blake. The company is switching to a new automated accounting system. The board of directors has decided to downsize the accounting department. You're firing me. It wasn't a question. We prefer the term staff optimization. Blake smiled awkwardly. Your position, as well as the positions of 3 other employees, the company can no longer support. Of course, we will compensate you according to the labor laws. I wasn't surprised by the news. Rumors about optimization had been floating around for a long time. What surprised me, rather, was that I felt neither anger nor resentment, only fatigue and a strange relief. It was as if someone had finally taken off the heavy burden I had been carrying all my life. When is my last day of work? I asked, keeping my composure. Actually, today. Kowalski looked embarrassed. We have all the paperwork ready. Of course, you can take your personal belongings and... I raised my hand, stopping him. Okay, I got it. 20 minutes later, I was standing in the parking lot with a cardboard box containing a picture frame of my late husband, Walter. A best accountant mug my colleagues had given me for my 60th birthday, a withered cactus, and a few office supplies. 35 years fit into one small box. On the way home, I reflected on my life. I was widowed early. Walter died of a heart attack when our son Bryce was only 12. Since then, I had lived alone, immersed in work and raising my son. Bryce grew up, graduated from college, married Veronica, and now they have 2 children, Justin and Amelia. My grandchildren hardly know me, and my son and daughter-in-law visit me 2 or 3 times a year, usually on major holidays, and then in passing. The bus stopped 2 blocks from my house. I lived in an old 5-story building on the outskirts of Thibodaux, the most upscale neighborhood, but I'd always liked its quiet, unpretentious atmosphere. The elevator wasn't working, as usual, and I walked slowly up to the 4th floor, trying not to drop my box of belongings. My apartment was small, just 1 bedroom, a living room combined with the kitchen and a tiny bathroom. But over 20 years, I'd made the place cozy. Bookshelves along the walls, an old rocking chair by the window, lush houseplants on the windowsills, modest but clean and neat. I set the box on the kitchen table and looked at the clock. It was almost 6 in the evening. Usually at this time, I just got home from work, cooked dinner, then watched the news or read a book. Today, the routine was disrupted, and it was causing a strange sense of disorientation. On the table was the letter I had received 2 days ago. I reread the envelope again. From the law firm of Prescott and Associates, personally to Mrs. Eleanor Kimball. Inside was a notice that my old friend Audrey Paxton, whom we had worked together at the bank before my marriage to Walter, had left me an inheritance. I was so surprised I didn't believe it right away. Audrey and I hadn't seen each other in almost 10 years, although we kept in touch through occasional letters and phone calls. I knew she was a wealthy woman. Her husband had founded a successful pharmaceutical company, but I had no idea she had put me in her will. I needed to call a lawyer and make an appointment, but first I had to deal with the more pressing issue of how to live without a job. I took a notebook and a pen, sat down at my desk, and began to calculate my finances. Small savings, pension, severance pay. Enough for a few months, no more. Especially since the landlord was planning to raise the rent. As if in answer to my thoughts, there was a knock on the door. Mr. Duncan, my landlord, stood on the doorstep, a heavy-set man in his 60s with a perpetually disgruntled expression. "Good evening, Mrs. Kimball," he said, entering the apartment uninvited. "I trust you received my notice of the rent increase?" "I did, Mr. Duncan." I closed the door firmly behind him. "But I have to say 15% is a steep increase." Duncan threw up his hands. "What can you do? It's the market. The neighborhood is growing. Prices are rising. I need confirmation that you're okay with the new terms, or I'll have to find another tenant." I hesitated for a moment, remembering I'd been fired today. It changed everything. "I'm afraid I can't afford the rent," I said finally. "I lost my job today." The expression on Duncan's face changed. Not that he looked sympathetic, more like annoyed by the new problem. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Kimball, but business is business. I can give you a month to find a new place to live." "A month? But the contract?" "The contract clearly states that you have 30 days to vacate the premises if you refuse the new lease," he said. "I'm already making concessions, given your age and how long you've lived here." When Duncan left, I sank heavily into the chair. Everything was happening too fast. First the firing, now this. I needed to find a new job and a place to live, but at 75, the chances of finding something suitable were slim to none. I spent the next few days looking for a job. I called people I knew, looked at ads in newspapers and on the internet, sent my resume. Everywhere the same polite refusal. "Unfortunately, we are looking for someone younger. We need someone familiar with modern systems. We'll let you know if something comes up." By the end of the week, I realized I needed to prepare for the worst. That evening, I pulled out my tattered notebook and found my son's phone number. Bryce rarely answered my calls, but today I was lucky. He picked up after the third ring. "Hello, Mom?" I could hear the surprise in his voice. "Is something wrong?" "Hello, Bryce." I tried to speak calmly. "Yeah, something's come up. I got laid off at work, and now I couldn't pay my rent." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry," he finally said without emotion. "What can I do to help?" I was thinking. "Maybe I could stay with you temporarily, until I find a job and a new place to live. I'd help with the kids, with the cooking." Silence again, longer. "Mom, you know we don't have much room." "You have a 4-bedroom house, Bryce." I couldn't keep the harshness out of my voice. "Yeah, but 1 bedroom is mine and Veronica's. The other 2 are the kids, and I have an office in the 4th. Besides, you know how sensitive Veronica is about her space." I closed my eyes, trying to suppress my growing irritation. Veronica had always treated me like an unavoidable evil that had to be put up with for the sake of decency. "I could sleep on the couch in the living room," I suggested. "It won't take long, Bryce. I just need time to get back on my feet." There was a muffled conversation in the phone. Apparently, Bryce was discussing the situation with Veronica. Then he returned to the conversation. "Okay, Mom, you can come over. But please try to get a job as soon as possible. You realize we have our own rhythm of life, and we can't—" "I understand," I interrupted him. "Thank you, Bryce. I'll try not to inconvenience you." When the conversation was over, I felt a tear roll down my cheek. The last thing in the world I wanted to do was move in with my son and daughter-in-law, who barely tolerated my presence, even for short visits. But there was no choice. I glanced at the letter from the lawyer still lying on the table. Perhaps an inheritance from Audrey could make a difference. I picked up my cell phone and dialed the number on the letter. The answering machine said the office was closed until Monday. Well, 3 more days of waiting. Then I started packing. Clothes, a few books, photo albums, documents. I decided to take only the essentials with me. I had been frugal all my life and hadn't accumulated many possessions. Perhaps it was for the best. Fewer attachments, fewer things to leave behind. Through the window, I watched the sun set over the rooftops. The sky was colored pinkish-orange, and for a moment I felt unbearably sad at the thought that soon I wouldn't be able to see this view from my window. 20 years I'd watched this sunset, and each time it was unique. It's going to be okay, I whispered to myself. You'll be okay, Eleanor. You always had. But in my heart, I wasn't sure I could bear the neglect of my son and his family, especially now that I felt so vulnerable. I could only hope that the lawyer would bring good news, and I could find a new place to live quickly. I checked the contents of my suitcase one more time and decided to go to bed. Tomorrow was going to be a tough conversation with Bryce about the moving date, and somehow I was sure it wouldn't be the most pleasant conversation of my life. Bryce and Veronica's house was perched on a hill in River Heights, the most upscale part of Thibodaux. The two-story mansion with its manicured lawn, backyard pool, and three-car garage looked like a picture from a glossy magazine. The cab stopped at the wrought iron gate, and I just sat there for a while, gathering my courage. Here we are, ma'am, the driver reminded me, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. I paid, trying not to think about how this spending was draining my meager savings, and got out of the car. The driver helped unload my 2 suitcases and a small box of personal belongings. When I rang the intercom, I heard Veronica's voice. Who is it? It's me, Eleanor, I answered, trying to sound cheerful. There was a long pause, then the gate slowly opened. I rolled the suitcases down the gravel driveway, feeling my back strain. The driveway was long, and the suitcase wheels kept getting stuck in the gravel. The front door opened when I was halfway to the house. Bryce stood on the doorstep in a business suit, clearly going to work. He waved awkwardly at me, but didn't make a move to help me with my luggage. "Good morning, Mom," he said when I finally got up on the porch. "I'm sorry, but I'm late for an important meeting. Veronica will show you where you'll be staying." He pecked me on the cheek quickly, as if performing an unpleasant duty, and headed toward the garage where his shiny black Lexus was parked. "Have a good day," I said after him, but he didn't seem to hear. I was met in the hallway by Veronica, a tall, slender woman with perfect hair and makeup, despite the early hour. She was dressed in a beige business suit that I was sure cost more than all my savings. "Eleanor," she nodded, making no attempt to hug me or even smile. "Come in, I'm leaving soon too, so I'll show you the house quickly." The inside was just as spotless as the outside. Marble floors, designer furniture, artwork on the walls. Not a single hint that children lived here. No toys, no clutter, no pictures in homemade frames. "Living room, kitchen, dining room," Veronica pointed to the rooms as she passed them. "The kids' rooms are upstairs. Our bedroom, too. Bryce's office is at the end of the hallway, so please don't go in there unless you have to." We went up the wide staircase to the second floor, where Veronica showed me a room at the far end of the hallway. "This is the guest room," she said. "Usually seasonal things are kept here, but we've made room for you." The room was small but decent: a bed, a dresser, a desk by the window. It was obvious, however, that it had been hastily cleared out of storage. There were still boxes labeled Christmas, Halloween, and ski equipment on the shelves. Folded suitcases stood in the corner, and the closet was half full of boxes. "The bathroom is 2 doors down the hall," Veronica continued. "Try to use it early in the morning or late at night so you don't have to create a line when the kids are getting ready for school." She pulled a piece of paper out of her pocket. "Here's the alarm code and the Wi-Fi password. You'll find food in the fridge, but please don't touch the organic food. It's for Justin and Amelia. They have a special diet. By the way, the kids will be home from school around 4 o'clock. They know you're coming over." She glanced at her watch and frowned. "I've got to go now. Client meeting in 40 minutes. Settle in, make yourself at home." The phrase sounded like a taunt. When Veronica left, I sank down on the bed and looked around the room. Everything about it screamed that this was a temporary shelter, that I was unwelcome here. I felt a lump come to my throat, but I quickly suppressed the weakness. There was no point in feeling sorry for myself. I had to pull myself together and get through this with dignity. I unpacked my suitcases, carefully arranging my things in the free part of the closet and dresser. Then I pulled out my cell phone and dialed the number of the law firm listed in the letter. "Prescott and Associates, how can I help you?" A pleasant female voice answered. "Hello, my name is Eleanor Kimball. I received a letter from your office regarding Audrey Paxton's inheritance." "Just a moment, Mrs. Kimball. I'll connect you with Mr. Prescott." After a brief pause, a deep masculine voice came through the receiver. "Randall Prescott, Good morning, Mrs. Kimball. I'm glad you contacted us. When would it be convenient for you to meet to discuss the details of the inheritance? The sooner the better, I replied. Today, if possible. Today? I could hear the surprise in his voice. Yes, I think that would be possible. I have a window in my schedule at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Is that okay with you? I said yes, wrote down the office address, and ended the conversation. Suddenly, I felt hungry. I hadn't eaten anything since morning, nervous about moving. In the kitchen, I carefully opened the refrigerator, trying to remember which foods Veronica had labeled forbidden. The fridge was stocked with a variety of food, most of it labeled organic, gluten-free, vegan. I found some cheese and bread that weren't labeled and made myself a modest sandwich. After eating, I decided to clean the house a bit so I wouldn't feel like a total freeloader. I washed dishes, wiped down countertops, and swept the floors. Time passed slowly, and to take my mind off my anxious thoughts, I started cooking dinner. I found chicken in the freezer, rice and vegetables in the pantry. By 4 o'clock, when the kids were due back, the smell of roast filled the kitchen. The front door slammed and I heard voices. First loud teenage laughter, then a sharp shush and muffled conversation. A minute later, Justin and Amelia entered the kitchen, my grandchildren, whom I'd seen at most once a year for the past few years. Justin was 15 and had almost caught up to his father in height. Dark hair, perpetually furrowed brow, headphones in his ears. Amelia, 13, was a carbon copy of her mother, just as blonde and slender with a cold, appraising gaze. "Hello, children," I smiled. "How was your day at school?" Justin mumbled something unintelligible and headed for the refrigerator, ignoring my question. Amelia looked me over from head to toe as if she were evaluating the merchandise in the store. "Hi, Grandma," she finally said. "Mom said you'd be staying with us." "Yes, dear, but not for long," I pointed to the stove. I made dinner, chicken stir-fry with rice. Justin slammed the refrigerator door shut, holding a bottle of some kind of green smoothie. "I don't eat meat," he threw in. "In fact, Amelia and I are on a special diet." "I'm sorry, I didn't know," I said, confused. "Would you like something else? I can make—" "No," Amelia interrupted. "We have our own smoothies and salads. Mom always orders takeout." They took their drinks and left the kitchen, leaving me alone with a cooling dinner. I felt even stranger than when I'd first stepped into this house. At 1:30, I called a cab to the law office. Prescott's office was in the center of town, in an old, columned building. Inside, everything breathed wealth and tradition: dark wood paneling, leather chairs, portraits of rugged men on the walls. The receptionist ushered me into the office of Randall Prescott, a large man with graying temples and a penetrating gaze. "Mrs. Kimball, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." He stood up from his desk and shook my hand. "Audrey's told me a lot about you." "Really?" I was surprised. We hadn't seen each other in years. "Oh, she always remembered you fondly." Prescott pointed to the chair across from his desk. "Said you were the only person who stood by her through the most difficult time of her life." I smiled, remembering how I'd helped Audrey after her first husband died, long before she'd met Howard Paxton and become rich. "She was a good friend," I said quietly. "And, as it turned out, a very grateful one." Prescott opened the folder in front of him. "As you know from my letter, Mrs. Paxton has included you in her will. But I don't suppose you realize the extent of the inheritance." He pulled out the document and placed it in front of me. "Audrey Paxton left you her mansion in River Heights, fully paid for, unencumbered. In addition, you are owed the sum of $1,700,000, which has already been transferred to a special account and will be available to you once all the formalities are completed." I felt my breath catching. This is a mistake." "We weren't that close." "There's no mistake, Mrs. Kimball." Prescott smiled. "In her letter enclosed with the will, Audrey explained that you saved her life many years ago when she was on the verge of suicide after the death of her first husband. She never forgot that. She had no children, and her relationship with the rest of her relatives didn't work out." I covered my mouth with my hand, trying to deal with my emotions. I had really helped Audrey during that terrible time, but I never realized it was so important to her. "When can I see the house?" I asked when I was able to speak again. "Right now." Prescott pulled a bunch of keys out of a drawer. "All the documents are ready, just need your consent and signature. The house is fully furnished and ready to move into." Mrs. Paxton had left instructions to make sure everything was kept in perfect condition. We spent the next half hour discussing legal details, signing documents. My head was spinning from the abundance of information and the sudden change in my fortunes. When everything was complete, Prescott handed me the keys and a folder of documents. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Kimball." He smiled sincerely. "I'd love to show you the house in person, but unfortunately I have an appointment. However, my assistant, Ms. Palmer, will be able to escort you." A young woman who introduced herself as Beatrice Palmer escorted me to the company car. On the way, she talked about the house and its features. But I hardly listened, absorbed in my own thoughts. Everything had happened so suddenly that I hardly realized the reality of what was happening. Audrey's mansion was only a few blocks away from Bryce's house, in the same upscale River Heights neighborhood. It was an elegant three-story Victorian-style building surrounded by a manicured garden. When we pulled up to the gates, I was breathless. Is this all mine now? Beatrice led me through the house, showing me the rooms. A spacious living room with antique furniture, a library with floor-to-ceiling books, 4 bedrooms, a study, a dining room, a modern kitchen, even a small movie room. Everything was kept in classic style with impeccable taste. "The house has a smart home system," Beatrice explained, pointing to the control panel. "From here you can control the lights, the temperature, the security. If you have any questions, here's the technical support number." She handed me a business card. "Also, on Mrs. Paxton's orders, a cleaning crew comes once a week. A gardener visits the property twice a month. All expenses have already been paid for the year ahead." I nodded, still not believing my happiness. When Beatrice left, I walked slowly around the house again, running my hand over the furniture, looking at the paintings on the walls, breathing in the scent of fresh flowers in vases. In the bedroom that was now to be mine, I saw a framed photograph of Audrey and me, young, smiling, embracing each other against the lake. I didn't remember the picture, but it had the carefree feeling of a distant youth. When I returned to Bryce's house, I found that no one was there. On the kitchen table was a note from Veronica. "Bryce and I are at a client dinner. The kids are at a friend's house. We'll be back late. Don't wait up." My roast remained on the stove, untouched. I put it away in the refrigerator, though I doubted anyone in the family would touch it. In my room, I sat on my bed and pulled out the papers Prescott had handed me. Among them was a letter from Audrey A., sealed envelope with my name written in her distinctive curlicued handwriting. "Dear Eleanor," she wrote, "if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer alive. Don't be sad for me. I have lived a long and generally happy life. Much of that happiness was made possible because of you. You're probably surprised at my decision to leave you the house and the money. But believe me, I've given it a lot of thought. I have no children. My nephews were never interested in me, only in my fortune. And you were the only person who was there for me when I was nothing. You saved me that cold evening when I stood on the bridge ready to jump. Your words and care brought me back to life. I want you to know. Every day since that night has been a gift for which I am grateful. My home is now your home. My resources are your resources. Live life to the fullest, Ellie. It's never too late to start over. Love, Audrey." I clutched the letter to my chest, feeling tears running down my cheeks. I had almost forgotten the night Audrey had written about. It had been so long ago. We were both young, working at a small bank. Audrey had just lost her husband in a car accident and was inconsolable. I happened to see her on the bridge and just talked to her, invited her for coffee, listened to her. Who would have thought that this ordinary human involvement would have such an impact on both of our lives? I tucked the letter back into the envelope, determined to keep it as my most treasured heirloom. Then I began to think through a plan of action. I needed to organize the move to the new house, but I didn't want to talk about the inheritance to Bryce and his family yet. Something told me it would be better to settle in first, and then announce the changes in my life. Sitting in the guest room among the boxes of seasonal items, I felt peace and hope for the first time in a long time. A new chapter of life was opening up ahead that I hadn't even dreamed of. And maybe it was a chance to finally gain the independence and respect I had been missing. You're absolutely right. It doesn't make sense in the context of a well-to-do family that probably has domestic staff. I'll rewrite the chapter with that comment in mind. It's been a week since I moved into Bryce and Veronica's house. Each day was similar to the last. Strained smiles, polite phrases, and the feeling that I was superfluous. I tried not to disturb the established order of the house, though it was difficult. The housekeeper Carmen came every morning. The cook Maria prepared lunches and dinners for the family according to a special menu. All I had to do was sit in my room or move quietly around the house trying to be inconspicuous. That morning I woke up earlier than usual. The clock on my bedside table read 5:30. It was still dark outside the window, but sleep was not coming. I dressed quietly and went down to the first floor. The house was silent, and I decided to make myself a cup of tea in the kitchen. As I carefully pulled the cup out of the cupboard, footsteps and muffled voices were heard from upstairs. Bryce and Veronica were coming down the stairs, unaware that I was already in the kitchen. "Can't go on indefinitely," Veronica said. "It's been a week and she hasn't even mentioned looking for a job or a place to live." "I know," Bryce replied, "but what can I do? She's my mother." "Your mother has always been a burden." Veronica sounded annoyed. "First for your father, now for us. She was always complaining about life, but she never did anything to change it." I froze, afraid to move. The cup froze in my hand. "We have to do something about the old woman," Veronica continued. "Maybe find her a place in a nursing home." "You have health insurance that covers that kind of expense, don't you?" "I'm not sure." Bryce sounded uncertain. "I'll have to check, but it's a good idea. We'll tell her it's temporary until she finds a job." They walked into the kitchen and froze when they saw me. I stood at the countertop, pretending I was just getting a cup of tea. "Good morning." I tried to make my voice sound normal. "I just wanted to make myself some tea." Veronica and Bryce exchanged glances. "Good morning," Veronica said coldly. "You know, Eleanor, we prefer only Maria to cook in our kitchen. Even simple things like tea. We have expensive equipment and Maria knows how to handle it." I slowly put the cup back on the shelf. "I'm sorry, I didn't know," I said. "I didn't mean to break your rules." Bryce looked embarrassed, but didn't interfere. He silently poured himself water from the filter. "Mom," he finally said, not looking me in the eye. "Veronica and I wanted to talk to you about your plans. You've been staying with us for a week now, but I don't see you actively looking for a job or a place to live." I felt myself blushing. "I send out resumes every day," I replied, "but it's hard to find a job at my age. As for a place to live, I need to save up for a down payment first." "Maybe you should consider some alternatives," Bryce suggested cautiously. "For example, nursing homes are very comfortable nowadays. There's a social life there, medical care, a nursing home." I couldn't believe my ears. "You want to send me to a nursing home?" "It's just an option," Veronica intervened. "Think about it, Eleanor. You're 75, you've just lost your job, you can't afford a place to live. It's the logical solution." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Randall Prescott. "Excuse me, I need to take this." I walked out of the kitchen and into the hallway. "Mrs. Kimball, good morning." Prescott's voice sounded cheerful. "I have good news. All the paperwork's done, the account's open, and the house is ready for you to move in. You can move in today." "That's, wonderful." I lowered my voice so I couldn't be heard from the kitchen. "I'll be there shortly to pick up the necessary paperwork." Finished talking, I went back into the kitchen. Bryce and Veronica were whispering about something, but they stopped talking when I appeared. "I have to run an errand," I said. "I'll be back for dinner." "What business could you possibly have?" Veronica wondered. "A job interview," I lied. "The insurance company was looking for a part-time counselor." I quickly went up to my room, changed my clothes, and called a cab. An hour later, I was already sitting in Prescott's office, signing the last of the paperwork. "Congratulations, Mrs. Kimball," the lawyer smiled, handing me a folder of documents and a bank card. You are now officially the owner of the mansion and all of Mrs. Paxton's accounts. This card has access to the main account. The rest of the details are in the paperwork." "Thank you, Mr. Prescott." I still couldn't believe this was happening to me. I didn't know how to express my gratitude. "Thank Audrey," he replied softly. "She really wanted you to be happy." Back at Bryce's house, I found the whole family gathered in the living room. It was unusual for the middle of the day, Usually everyone was at work or school. Mom, we need to talk. Bryce looked determined. Sit down, please. I sank into the chair, feeling my heart pounding. Veronica sat on the couch with her hands folded in her lap, a look of fake sympathy on her face. The kids were nestled in the corner of the room, tucked away on their phones, but clearly listening. Veronica and I have been doing a lot of thinking, Bryce began. We've come to the conclusion that we can't go on like this for much longer. We have our own lives, our own plans, our own rhythm. And you? He hesitated, searching for words. And I'm in the way, I finished for him. Not that you're in the way, Bryce said diplomatically. It's more like you'd be better off in a place where you'd be properly taken care of. We found a great nursing home, Veronica chimed in. Sun Valley. It has a pool, a library, entertainment programs. We've already paid in advance. I stared at them, not believing my ears. You guys decided everything for me without even asking my opinion? Mom, be reasonable, Bryce sighed. You have no job, no place to live, no savings. What are you going to do? Live on the streets? Besides, Veronica added, your presence here is creating a definite inconvenience. You're always out of your room when the housekeeper comes, and it embarrasses her. Maria complained that you were trying to give her cooking tips. I was just suggesting a roast recipe, I countered. I wanted to be helpful. We have a cook just so we don't have to think about recipes, Veronica retorted. We pay her to cook according to the menu our nutritionist has drawn up. I felt tears coming to my eyes, but I held them back. I didn't want to give them the pleasure of seeing me cry. You're also always trying to give advice to the kids, Veronica continued. Justin and Amelia had already complained about you minding your own business. I glanced at the grandchildren, who were studying their phones with exaggerated interest, avoiding my gaze. I was just asking how school was going, I said quietly. See? Veronica turned to Bryce triumphantly. She doesn't even realize what she's doing wrong. Bryce rubbed the bridge of his nose. Mom, understand, we want what's best for you. You'll be comfortable at Sun Valley. They can admit you in 3 days. In the meantime, he hesitated. In the meantime, I'd better pack my things and leave. I finished for him. No, we're not kicking you out. Bryce was quick to object. It's just, maybe you should start getting ready to move. You're exactly kicking me out. I stood up. You don't have to cover it up with pretty words. You've decided that your old mother is a burden, and you've decided to get rid of her by locking her in a nursing home. Don't be dramatic, Eleanor, Veronica snorted. It's not a prison, but a modern, comfortable facility, which you chose without my knowledge or consent, I pointed out. Because we knew you'd object, Bryce raised his voice. You've always been like this, stubborn, ungrateful, self-centered. There was silence in the room. Even the kids looked up from their phones, shocked by their father's outburst. I'm only thinking of myself? My voice was quiet but firm. I gave up everything to get you an education, Bryce. Worked 2 jobs when your father died. Didn't remarry, even though there were offers, because I was afraid your stepfather would treat you badly. And now when I need help for the first time in my life, you're kicking me out the door. Bryce looked like I punched him. It's not, I didn't, he stammered, then pulled himself together. You're being dramatic. No one's kicking you out the door. We're offering a solution to a problem. A solution for you, not for me. I headed for the stairs. Don't worry, I won't bother you. I'll move out tonight. Where are you going to go? Bryce exclaimed. You have no money, no place to live. I didn't answer and went up to my room. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my suitcases and started putting things away. There was a knock on the door. It was Bryce. Mom, don't do anything stupid, he said. You can't just leave. I can, I replied, still packing, and I'm leaving. But where to? He looked confused, as if he hadn't expected that reaction. That's not your concern anymore. Bryce shook his head. You always make everything so complicated. We wanted to help and you're making a scene. A scene? I turned to him. You decide to put me in a nursing home without my consent and I make a scene? It's the best thing for everyone, Bryce insisted. You can't live alone and we can't keep you here forever. Don't worry, I said, zipping up my suitcase. I'm not going to impose on you a day longer. You've always been like this. Bryce sounded annoyed, always thinking of yourself as a victim. Even when your father was alive, you were always complaining about your plight. Your father drank, I said quietly, and he gambled away his money. I never told you, so as not to ruin your memory of him. But yeah, I've had my share of hard times. Bryce looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. There's always an excuse, right? He finally said it. Fine, do whatever you want, but don't come asking for help later. He walked out, slamming the door. I finished packing, hailed a cab, and went down to the living room where the family was still sitting. I'm leaving, I announced. Thank you for your hospitality. Eleanor, don't be childish, Veronica sighed. Where will you go? That's my business, I replied. Don't worry about me. Amelia looked up from the phone for the first time. Grandma, why don't you stay? There was more curiosity than concern in her voice. Where are you going to go? I have a plan, honey, I smiled at her. Don't worry. The cab pulled up to the house and I headed for the exit, dragging 2 suitcases behind me. No one offered to help. I turned around at the door. Goodbye, I said. I wish you all the best. No one answered. Bryce was staring out the window. Veronica was studying her fingernails. The kids were back on their phones. I walked out, closing the door behind me. The cab driver helped me with my suitcases. Where are we going, ma'am? He asked. I gave the address of Audrey's mansion. As I drove, I looked out the window at the houses running by and thought about how strangely my life had turned. A week ago, I was desperate, jobless, homeless, forced to ask my son for help. And today I'm on my way to my own mansion with a bank account I couldn't have dreamed of before. When the cab stopped at the gates of Audrey's house, now my house, I felt strangely calm. After paying the driver, I went to the front door and put the key in the lock. The door opened silently, and I stepped inside. The house greeted me with silence and coolness. I left my suitcases in the hall and walked slowly through the rooms, touching the furniture, looking at the paintings, soaking up the atmosphere. This place belonged to me now. I could do whatever I wanted here without fear of judgment or ridicule. In the master bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and, for the first time all day, let myself cry. Not out of grief or resentment, but out of relief and gratitude for Audrey, who even in death had been able to change my life for the better. Wiping away my tears, I began unpacking, arranging my things in the spacious closets. My few dresses and blouses looked shabby and old-fashioned next to Audrey's elegant outfits that still hung in the dressing room. I decided I'd give them to charity at the first opportunity, but I had better things to do now. I called the bank listed on Prescott's paperwork and confirmed my identity. Then I ordered a delivery of groceries and essentials. Then I went out into the garden and sat in the gazebo, enjoying the warm day and the quiet. It was evening when I heard a knock on the wicket. I looked out the window and saw a middle-aged woman with a basket in her hands. "Hello," she shouted. "I'm your neighbor, Penelope Holt. I wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood." I opened the gate and invited her inside. "Pleased to meet you, Eleanor Kimball," I introduced myself. "Come in, let's have tea." Penelope entered, looking around curiously. "I was a good friend of Audrey's," she said. "I miss her very much. When I found out the house was sold, I was worried about who the new neighbor would be. I'm glad it's you. You seem like a nice woman." "It's not sold," I corrected. "I inherited it. Audrey was an old friend of mine." Penelope's eyes widened with surprise. "Really?" Audrey had never mentioned, although she was rather secretive about her personal life. We went into the kitchen where I put the kettle on and took out cups. "How long have you lived in this neighborhood?" I asked. "About 15 years, Penelope answered. "My husband Howard works as a surgeon at Central Hospital. We have 2 grown children, both of whom are now separated." She spread the sweets she had brought on the table, homemade cookies and muffins. "It's a great neighborhood, and all the neighbors know each other. You'll love it here," she smiled. "By the way, there's a Kimball family just a few blocks away. Maybe they're related to you?" I almost dropped my cup. "Yeah, that's my son Bryce and his family." "Oh, what a coincidence," Penelope exclaimed. "I know Veronica well. We're on the neighborhood philanthropy committee together. She never mentioned that her mother-in-law was moving into the Paxton mansion." "They don't know," I said quietly. "I just moved in today, and it was a surprise to everyone." Penelope looked puzzled but politely didn't ask further. Instead, she started talking about the neighborhood, the best stores, restaurants, and parks nearby. I listened half listening, wondering how quickly Bryce and Veronica would find out about my new place of residence. Considering how tight-knit the residents of the neighborhood are, the news would spread quickly. "We're having a book club meeting tomorrow at the community center," Penelope said. "You should come. Get to know everyone. They are very nice people." "Thank you for the invitation." I smiled. "Perhaps I'll stop by." When Penelope left, I stood at the window, looking at the street, lit by the street lamps. My new home, my new life. And somewhere not too far away, a family who thought I was a burden and wanted to get rid of me. I wonder what they'll say when they find out the truth. I woke up in my new bedroom, enjoying the quiet and softness of the bed. The sunlight was streaming through the curtains, creating a cozy twilight. For the first time in a long time, I slept without anxious thoughts about tomorrow, without feeling like I was an extra in the way. After stretching, I got up, put on my robe, and went down to the kitchen. The groceries had arrived last night, and now I could make myself a real breakfast. Scrambled eggs and bacon, freshly squeezed orange juice, toast with jam. Simple pleasures I hadn't been able to afford in recent weeks. Having breakfast on the terrace, I admired the garden. Everything was perfectly manicured, not a single weed, trimmed bushes, flower beds in bloom. The gardener Beatrice had mentioned clearly knew his business. I felt strangely calm and peaceful, as if I had returned home after a long, tiring journey. My thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of the phone. Glancing at the screen, I saw Bryce's name. My finger hovered over the answer button, but I decided to decline the call. It wasn't time to talk yet. Let him suffer the unknown for a while. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Veronica. I pressed reject again, then muted it and put the phone in my pocket. Deciding to take a closer look at the garden, I walked slowly along the well-maintained paths. In the far corner, I found a small bench under an old apple tree and settled there, breathing in the scent of the flowers and listening to the birds singing. My thoughts flowed leisurely, without the usual anxiety and bitterness. Back in the house, I decided to explore the library. A room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves had always been a dream of mine. Audrey had amassed an impressive collection: classic literature, modern novels, popular books on history, art, science. I chose a volume of Emily Dickinson's poetry and settled into a comfortable chair by the window. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Penelope stood on the threshold with another woman, an elegant lady in her 60s. "Eleanor, darling," Penelope exclaimed. "We thought we'd drop by to invite you to lunch. This is Diane Foster, another of your neighbors." "Nice to meet you." I shook her outstretched hand. "Please come in." The women entered the house, looking around curiously. "Audrey always knew how to make things cozy," Diana said. "This house has always been the most welcoming in the neighborhood." "I hope to keep up that tradition," I smiled, "although I still need time to settle in." "Of course, dear," Penelope nodded. "But don't worry, we'll help you. In our neighborhood, everyone supports each other." We went into the living room, where I offered tea and cookies. The conversation was relaxed. The women talked about the neighborhood, about their neighbors, about the traditions of the local community. I was surprised to find that I was at ease with them, no condescension or fake politeness, as was often the case with Veronica's friends. "By the way," Penelope said casually, "I saw your sister-in-law at a charity event yesterday. She mentioned that she'd met you." I tensed. "And how did she react?" "She was very surprised." Penelope exchanged glances with Diana. "She didn't seem to know about your inheritance." "Yes, it was unexpected for everyone," I answered cautiously. "I don't mean to pry," Diana said softly. "But are you having family difficulties?" I hesitated. I didn't want to make my family problems public, but I didn't want to lie to these friendly women. "Let's just say that my son and his family have different ways of looking at life," I said. "When I lost my job and couldn't pay my rent, they took me in, but not too willingly. Not very willingly." "Oh dear." Penelope shook her head sympathetically. "It's so hard when your relatives don't support you in your time of need." "And they didn't know about the inheritance?" Diana asked. "No," I shook my head. "I found out about it shortly before I lost my job, but the formalities were only finalized the day before yesterday." "And now they're trying to contact you?" Penelope guessed. I nodded. "My phone hasn't stopped ringing since this morning." but I'm not ready to talk yet. Of course you need time, Diana said understandingly. Sometimes distance is the best way to work things out. After the guests left, I checked my phone. 7 missed calls from Bryce, 5 from Veronica, and even 1 from Justin, which was unexpected. There was also a message from Bryce. Mom, we need to talk. Please call me back. I opened my email and saw an email from my son. It was full of apologies and concern for my well-being. Not a word about the inheritance, not a hint that they had learned the truth. I grinned. Bryce was always a good actor when it was to his advantage. Without answering the email, I closed my laptop and decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. The day was too good to waste on gloomy thoughts of family problems. River Heights was even more beautiful than I remembered from my rare visits with my son. Manicured streets, gorgeous homes, perfect lawns. I walked slowly, enjoying the sunshine and fresh air. A few passers-by nodded at me. Some even stopped to introduce themselves and chat. Apparently, news of the new owner of the Paxton mansion had already spread through the neighborhood. When I got home, I found another letter from Bryce and 2 from Veronica. Both were written in a similar tone: concern, apologies, request to meet, and still not a word about the inheritance. By late afternoon, the number of missed calls had reached 25. I decided it was time to stop playing this game. Turning on my phone, I dialed Bryce's number. He answered after the first ring. Mom? He sounded worried. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm fine, I answered calmly. I'm in a safe place. I have a roof over my head and food. There's nothing to worry about. But where did you go? Why haven't you been answering your cell phone? Veronica and I were worried sick. Really? There was irony in my voice. I thought you were fine with the idea of sending me to a nursing home the day before yesterday. Mom! Bryce's voice turned pleading. We overreacted. We were wrong. Please, let's meet and talk about this. Not now, Bryce, I said firmly. I need time to think things over. I'll contact you when I'm ready. But Mom... Goodbye, Bryce. I ended the call without letting him finish his sentence. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Veronica. I hesitated, but answered it. Eleanor. Veronica's voice sounded unusually soft. I'm so glad you answered. Bryce and I were worried sick. Were you? I asked dryly. Of course we were, she exclaimed. You left so suddenly without telling us where you were going. We were afraid something had happened to you. As you can see, I'm all right, I replied. There's nothing to worry about. Eleanor, please, Veronica's voice was pleading. Let's meet. Bryce and I want to apologize in person. What we said the day before yesterday, it was wrong. We were out of sorts, worried about finances, about the future. But that's no excuse. Veronica, I sighed. We both know that you and Bryce weren't out of sorts. You just said what you thought. And you know what? I'm grateful for that. I finally saw the truth. No, Eleanor, you don't understand. I understand perfectly well, I interrupted her. And right now I need time and space. Please respect that. I ended the call and turned off the phone. Then I went to the window and took a long look at the setting sun, coloring the sky orange and pink. Strangely, I felt neither anger nor resentment, just tiredness and a new, unfamiliar calm. The next morning, I was awakened by the doorbell. A delivery man stood on the doorstep with a huge bouquet of flowers. Delivery for Mrs. Kimball, he said, holding out a gorgeous arrangement of roses and orchids. I took the bouquet and read the attached card. Mom, please forgive us. We were wrong. Call me when you're ready to talk. Love, Bryce and Veronica. Placing the flowers on the living room table, I opened my laptop. The new email from Bryce was long and emotional. He wrote that he realized his mistake, that he'd always loved me, but work and stress had made him forget the most important things. He asked for a meeting, promised to make things right. There was also a letter from Veronica, more restrained, but also full of apologies and requests for forgiveness. She wrote that she didn't mean to offend me, that she was just concerned about my well-being, and a nursing home seemed like the best solution. I closed my laptop without replying to any of the emails. I knew I would have to talk to my son and his wife sooner or later, but not now. Right now, I needed to focus on my new life. There were several other deliveries throughout the day: a box of chocolates, a fruit basket, even a bottle of expensive wine. all with similar notes full of apologies and requests to meet up. Toward evening, I decided to turn on my phone. As I expected, it was full of messages from Bryce, Veronica, even the grandchildren, all in the same vein. "Grandma, please call. We miss you. We want to make sure you're okay." I chuckled, imagining Veronica making the kids write these messages. Justin and Amelia had never taken much interest in me, and that had hardly changed in the last 2 days. The house phone rang, another line of communication that Bryce and Veronica didn't know about. It was Penelope. "Eleanor, darling," she said. "I hope I'm not interrupting. Calling to invite you to our book club tomorrow. Nothing formal, just a friendly neighborhood get-together?" "I'd love to come," I replied. "Thanks for the invitation." "Great," rejoiced Penelope. "By the way, I saw your son and daughter-in-law today. They asked about you, all the neighbors." "Really?" I was not surprised. "And what did you tell them?" "That I'd met you, that you looked beautiful and seemed very happy with your new home." Penelope laughed. "They looked stunned, especially your sister-in-law." I smiled. "I can imagine. Thank you, Penelope." "You're welcome, dear. See you tomorrow." After the conversation, I went to the window again. The sun was setting, coloring the sky a deep purple. Somewhere out there, a few blocks away, my son and daughter-in-law were probably discussing how to win back my favor. No longer out of a sense of obligation or pity, but because of my sudden wealth. I felt no gloating or desire for revenge, only sadness that it took an inheritance to make my family remember my existence, and a firm resolve to never let them use and humiliate me again. Picking up my phone, I texted a quick message to Bryce. "I'm fine. I'm living in Audrey Paxton's house that I inherited. Don't call or come over uninvited. We'll contact you when I'm ready to talk." It had been 2 weeks since I had moved into Audrey's mansion. In that time, I'd fully settled into my new home, reorganized my daily routine, and even started making new acquaintances. Penelope's book club was just what I needed. Interesting conversations, intelligent people, no condescension because of my age. That morning I had breakfast on the terrace, enjoying fresh coffee and croissants from the French bakery Diana had recommended. I hadn't checked out the newspaper yet, preferring the news electronically, but old habits die hard, and I imagined the paper rustling under my fingers anyway. My phone jingled. It was a message from Penelope. "Turn on the local news. There's a story on the Kimballs." I frowned, set my cup aside, and went into the living room. I found the remote for the huge TV, which I'd hardly ever turned on before, and tuned in the local channel. The announcer was just finishing a story. One of Thibodeau's most successful real estate agencies was at the center of a scandal. Veronica Kimball, owner of River Heights Realty, is accused of ethical violations in her dealings with West Coast Realty. The clients allege that Ms. Kimball withheld information about problems with the building's foundation, leading to... I turned off the TV, mulling over what I'd heard. Veronica had always been ambitious and assertive. No wonder she could cross the line for a big deal. But the consequences for her were obviously serious. The phone rang again, this time a message from Bryce. "Mom, please, we need to talk. It's very important. Can we meet?" I didn't answer. In the past 2 weeks, Bryce had sent me about 30 messages and called me the same number of times. Veronica wrote less frequently, but her messages were getting more desperate. Even the grandchildren suddenly remembered their grandmother's existence and sent a few awkward messages. Later that afternoon, I met Penelope for lunch at a small restaurant nearby. "Have you seen the news?" she asked as soon as we sat down at the table. "Just the end of the story," I answered. "What about Veronica?" "Oh, it's a real scandal." Penelope lowered her voice, though no one was around. "She sold an office building to a large company, but forgot to mention that there were serious problems with the foundation. Now the company is demanding rescission and compensation. It could cost her license." I shook my head. "What about Bryce?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Not the best of times either," Penelope sighed. Word around town was that his investment firm had lost a major client. Howard, Diana's husband, was at the same club as Bryce's partner, and he hinted that things were bad. I listened with mixed feelings. On the one hand, I didn't want to gloat over my son's problems. On the other, it was hard to sympathize with a man who had so easily thrown me out of his life when I had become a burden. They've come to see me 3 times already, Penelope continued. They've asked about you, about your plans. I told them you were happy and busy setting up your new home. Veronica looked upset. I can imagine, I replied dryly. Eleanor, Penelope touched my arm gently. I don't want to pry, but maybe you should talk to them, not for their sake, but for my own. To let go of the past. I've been thinking, maybe she's right. Maybe I do need to put a stop to this relationship in order to move on. Maybe you're right, I finally said. But not right now. I'm not ready. When I got home, I found the delivery guy at the gate with another bouquet of flowers. The 6th in 2 weeks. I took the bouquet, read the attached card, apologies and requests to meet again, and put the flowers in a vase in the kitchen. In the evening, as I was reading in the library, the intercom buzzed. On the small screen, I saw Bryce and Veronica standing at the gate. My heart sped up. Mom? Bryce's voice sounded tense. Are you home? Please, we need to talk. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just ignore them, but the other part of me knew that sooner or later this conversation had to happen. I'm listening, I finally answered over the intercom. Can we come in? Bryce asked. We have a lot to talk about. No, I said firmly. We can talk like this. What do you want? Bryce and Veronica looked at each other. Even through the intercom's small screen, I could see that they looked exhausted, the circles under their eyes, the tense faces. Mom, Bryce began. We came to apologize. What we did to you? It's unforgivable. We were selfish and callous. Please give us a chance to make it right. Make it right? I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. What exactly do you want to fix, Bryce? The fact that you kicked me out the door when I was unemployed and homeless? Or for treating me like an annoying burden for years? Eleanor, Veronica interjected. We have behaved wrongly, but we sincerely want to make it right. Please give us the opportunity. Sincerely? I interjected. Tell me, Veronica, when exactly did you become sincerely concerned about my well-being? Before or after you learned of my inheritance? On the screen, I saw Veronica turn pale. It's not about the money, Bryce said quickly. We just want to rebuild our relationship. Family is the most important thing. Family? My voice shook. Where was that concern for family when you let your wife and kids treat me like a servant? Where was it when you agreed to send me to a nursing home without even asking my opinion? Mom, I was wrong. Bryce sounded desperate. I was confused, letting work and money overshadow what was most important. Please give me a chance to make it right. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. You know, Bryce, I've been thinking about our family a lot these past 2 weeks, remembering how things were when you were little. How I worked 2 jobs after your dad died so you could go to a good school. How I refused new relationships for fear of your stepfather treating you badly. How I saved money on everything to pay for your college. Bryce lowered his head. I know, Mom. You always made sacrifices for me. And then you grew up, got married, became successful, I continued. And slowly I became an inconvenient reminder of your past, that you weren't always the rich, successful Bryce Kimball of River Heights. That's not true, he protested, but without much conviction. It is, I said firmly. When was the last time you called me just to check on me? Not on my birthday, not on a holiday, but just for fun? When was the last time you took me out to dinner out of obligation? When was the last time your kids talked to me for longer than 5 minutes? On the screen, I could see Veronica fidgeting nervously with the strap of her bag. We've been busy, she mumbled. Work, kids, social obligations. There's always an excuse, isn't there? I interrupted her. But the truth is, I just wasn't a priority. I was a burden, only remembered when it was necessary to maintain the image of the perfect family. Eleanor, Veronica's voice became pleading. We're really sorry, and we want to make things right. Maybe you could help us. We're going through a difficult time. This is it, I thought. Finally, the real reason for their visit. Ah, here's the thing, I said slowly. You want money. No, I don't, Bryce exclaimed. I mean, not just, we're in a really bad situation, but more importantly, we want to rebuild our family. What a coincidence, I said sarcastically. You remembered the importance of family relations just when your financial affairs went down the drain and I had money. Mom, please. Bryce sounded desperate. You don't understand. We could lose the house, the business. The kids would have to change schools. We're just asking for temporary help until we get back on our feet. What would you do if I didn't get the inheritance? I asked. If I was still that poor old woman you so easily shoved out the door. They were silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. Exactly, I said quietly. You would have handled it on your own, like I'd been doing my whole life. Eleanor, Veronica took a step closer to the intercom camera. I know we weren't perfect, but for the sake of the children, for Justin and Amelia, they're not to blame for our mistakes. I sighed. Grandchildren. My mild temper had always been my weakness, and Veronica knew it. Justin and Amelia, I said slowly. How many times had they called me in the last year? How many times had they asked me how I was doing? How many times had they just hugged their grandmother, not out of compulsion, but out of their own volition? Veronica lowered her eyes. They're teenagers, she muttered. You know what they're like at that age. I know what they've become under your influence, I replied. Selfish, indifferent, thinking the whole world revolves around them. That's not fair, Bryce protested. They're good kids. Maybe, I agreed. But they've never been good grandchildren, and that's part of the way you've built our family. There was silence. I could see Bryce and Veronica exchanging glances, as if deciding what tactic to use next. Mom, Bryce said finally, I understand your resentment, and I accept that we deserve your anger. But please, at least tell me, is there any chance we can make this right? Can we hope that someday you'll forgive us? I wondered. Part of me wanted to just cut off. No, never. But another part of me realized that being so adamant wouldn't bring me peace. I don't know, Bryce, I answered honestly. I don't want anything to do with you right now. I need time to heal the wounds you've caused. Maybe someday, but don't count on it anytime soon. What about financial aid? Veronica asked cautiously. Just to get us through this crisis, we could make it official with a repayment agreement. No, I said firmly. I'm not giving you any money. Not now, not later. But why not? Veronica sounded indignant. You have the means, and we're a family. Because money is all you're really interested in, I answered. And because I've already made a will. A will? Bryce asked. Yes, I nodded, though they couldn't see it over the intercom. I've already made my will, and I can tell you one thing, you're not in it. I saw Veronica's face contort with shock and anger. You can't, she exclaimed. It's not fair. Who are you going to leave everything to? To some strangers? It's none of your business, I replied calmly. My fortune is my business. As you have repeatedly made me realize, it's every man for himself in this world. Mom, think carefully. Bryce's voice sounded strained. You're acting out of resentment. But it's wrong. We're your family, your blood. Who better to leave an inheritance to than family? Family isn't just blood, Bryce, I said quietly. Family is caring, support, love. All the things you haven't given me in years. We can change, Veronica exclaimed. Give us a chance. I'm afraid you've already had every chance I could give you, I replied. Now please leave. I've said all I want to say. Eleanor, please. Veronica took a step toward the gate. We could lose everything. The house, the business, our reputation. Like I almost lost everything when you kicked me out? I asked. The only difference is that I had no family to help. And you have a friend of a friend. Use that. I saw Bryce put his hand on Veronica's shoulder, holding her back. Let's go, he said quietly. She wouldn't change her mind. But our children, Veronica exclaimed. Our home, you can't just let her. Let's go, Bryce repeated harder now. We're only making things worse. He turned to the intercom camera. Mom, I'm sorry, I really am. If you ever want to talk, I'll be waiting. They walked slowly to their car. I watched Veronica say something fervently to Bryce, gesturing and looking back at the house. He shook his head, looking defeated and aged. When they left, I stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the empty street. Strangely, I felt neither triumph nor gloating, only relief and a quiet, calm certainty that I had done the right thing. That night I slept soundly, without the usual awakenings and restless thoughts. In the morning, over a cup of coffee, I thought about Bryce and Veronica. Despite all the hurt, I didn't wish them harm. They'd get by. Bryce had always been smart, and Veronica was assertive enough. They might have to sell the house, move the kids to a regular school, start over. But it wouldn't be the end of the world, and it might even be good for them. As for me, I could finally stop worrying about what others thought of me. At 75, I'd gotten a chance to live for myself, and I wasn't going to miss it. I sipped my coffee and opened my book. The day was just beginning, and I didn't want to waste it thinking about the past. Prescott had promised to bring the paperwork for the charity I decided to start. Penelope was calling for lunch, and tonight the book club was supposed to be discussing a new novel. I had my own life, and it was fulfilling enough without the toxic relationship with my son and his family.